Welcome back to Country Cow Designs. I'm Jo, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make these bags. So this pattern is a little bit different to what we normally do. This is a really good beginner pattern, great for like your first sewing project ever, okay? Now we are doing this pattern in partnership with the Trimming Shop, which is a UK business who makes things like this lovely hand press, and other hand tools like this, which is why each of these patterns, it's a 2-in-1 pattern, has hardware. So the drawstring version has eyelets that need fitting, and the grab handle version has rivets that need fitting. So we approached the Trimming Shop a while ago and we said, you know, a lot of our followers are bag makers, they'd love this kind of thing. Is there any chance they could supply them for us, for our shop, so that people can come in and try them out? They said, yeah, absolutely. They gifted them to us. That was awesome. This is so much better than the one that we've always used. So we're really glad we did that. And then they said, how about we do a pattern with them? So that's what we're doing here today. If you're watching this after December 2024, then you will be able to get the pattern from our website, countrycowdesigns.com. Until then, it's exclusively available through the Trimming Shop if you buy something like a hand press off them. So this pattern is 2-in-1. We've got the grab handle and we've got the drawstring, which works simply by pulling up the drawstring. And then the bag opens up like that. Ta-da! And then you just pull it closed again and slide your knot back down. So Adam initially designed this pattern to be a good like gift bag. So you can put your gifts in it and then also gift the bag to people. A lot of people have said to me they want to use one of these for like their makeup and their bottles and stuff in their bedroom. But it's got a million uses. So I hope you're going to enjoy this tutorial. If you want some more inspiration, there's loads of tester photos on our website. We have tested the pattern in a lot of materials. For example, wax canvas, cotton canvas, corduroy, and faux leather. So we can verify that it works well in a variety of materials, but whatever material you choose, make sure it's suitable to your sewing machine. If you're using a domestic sewing machine, something like a nice cotton is a really good idea. So if this is your first time making a bag, we have kits available in our shop. This is one of the kits. Each kit includes the 2 versions, enough fabric, stabilizer, the grab handle, the cord, everything you need. If you've never used stabilizer before, this might be a good option for you because it's going to include everything that gives the bag structure. So once you've grabbed the pattern, it will have all of the pattern pieces in there and the instructions for fusing your fabrics to the interfacing and that kind of thing. You can go ahead and cut out everything and get ready to sew it with me. We have made these on a variety of machines, my Janome HD9 straight stitch, Adam's industrial machine, and also my domestic Bonina machine. So I can verify that it works on a variety of machines, but today I'm going to be using my Janome HD9. So I hope you'll join me today to make these two. We're going to be making both versions, so whichever version you want to make, I will be showing that in the video. Or of course, if you prefer, you can just follow the written pattern. So let's get started. Section 1 of the pattern is preparation. That section in the written pattern will explain to you how to choose your fabrics, print your pattern, that kind of thing. So I'm going to be making both versions of the bag in this tutorial. So I've cut out twice as much as I need. This is going to be one of my fabrics and this will be the other. I'm going to switch them around so one has the lining for this and one has a lining for that. I have used a lightweight interfacing as recommended in the pattern. If you've used a heavier weight, you may want to just trim the interfacing out of the corners on all of your pattern pieces. That will make it much easier to sew where the seams join. You'll also want to fuse your stabilizer to all of your pattern pieces. So make sure that you fuse them all to the same pieces. So I've chosen to fuse them all to this fabric, not this one. And you want to make sure that your stabilizers are all centered. You'll have 2 base pieces which will have an ultra firm stabiliser, and then all of the other pattern pieces will have a lighter weight stabiliser. For this one I'm using Decaville Light. For the base I'm using Peltex 71F. So for this pattern you will have all of your main panels and your flap, if you're having the flap version, otherwise you won't have that. If you're having the tie cord version, you're also going to have your cord and your eyelets. All of these are set out in the materials in the pattern list. If you're having a grab handle version, you'll have a leather handle and some rivets. Whichever version you're going for, you are going to need a hand press or hand tool, and your tool will need to be able to set eyelets or rivets. I'll link a video here to explain more about using these things, and I'm also going to be linking some videos for the trimming shop who show how to use their hand press for setting eyelets and rivets. Step 2 is the flaps. This only applies if you're having the tie cord version of the bag. If not, you can skip to the next step. For this step you're going to need your 4 lining pieces and your 4 exterior pieces of flap. You should also have the stabiliser all fused to one set of fabric. And you're going to need your eyelets. So choose which you're going to have for your exterior fabric. I think for this one I might actually go for the red on the exterior. The first thing that you want to do is get your paper pattern piece and mark the location of the eyelets on each one. So I've gone ahead and marked each of mine with a tiny hole. Now what we're going to do is we're going to place the exterior and the lining right sides together and then just clip those together. We'll be repeating all of these steps to create 4 flaps the exact same way, so you can go ahead and clip all of your flaps like this. Now I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine, and we want to sew these sides with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, as close as you can get to the stabiliser. But you're not going to sew the straight bottom edge because that's where we're going to turn the flap out. For this step I like to use a zip foot because it guides my needle right next to the stabiliser. The closer you get to the stabiliser, the neater the finish that you'll have on your flap. I also recommend using a shorter stitch length on the curve. It will ensure that you get a much neater finish on the curve. Once your flaps are all sewn, you can use some pinking shears to trim the curve, and this will help it lay flatter once we turn this out. So you can just do the whole lot, or you can just do the curved section, and then I like to do this little section down here so we don't have too much bulk on the corner there, and do that with all 4 of your flaps. If you don't have pinking shears, you can just cut these small triangles into the curve. It just ensures that the fabric doesn't get too bulky on the curve. Now we need to turn these right side out. So you just turn them out through the gap that you left there in the bottom, and you want to poke it out with whatever you've got handy that's not too pointy, but you know, pointy enough. If you have a chopstick, that would be great, or a turning tool, anything like that. This is one of Adam's leather tools, which I've just found. So you just want to push the curve out. Now, what you want to do is take it over to the iron and give it a press so that it sits as neatly as possible. And you're going to do that with all 4 of your flaps. If you're using a fabric that doesn't like heat, you could use a seam roller instead, something like this, where you can roll the seams flat. This works well for things like faux leather or cork. Once those are pressed and looking neat, you just need to take them over to the sewing machine and top stitch all of the sides, so we're closing this raw edge gap as well. Usually for top stitching we use a longer stitch length, such as a 4mm. However, you do need to be careful because the longer the stitch length, the harder it is to top stitch those curves. Okay, so now those are top stitched, we need to punch the holes for the eyelets. So I'm going to be using my green machine from the trimming shop. There's lots of tools like this out there. This one is from the trimming shop in the UK, who gave this to us so that we could use it in our shop for customers to try out. There's also lots of hand tool versions, and if you're outside of the UK, for example in America, you probably have heard of cam snaps, and there will be different companies like this across the world. So what you do is you can choose which dies, these are called dies, you need for the job. So for this job I'm using a 10mm hole cutting die to cut the holes. So one piece goes in the bottom and the other piece screws into the top, I'm now going to place my flap onto here, and I'm going to use that little hole that I made earlier as a guide. And what that does is cuts a little hole through all of the layers. So I didn't quite push hard enough. When you push it, it's very difficult with the camera there. When you push it hard enough, it's going to punch the hole through in one go. So I'm going to do this for all 4 of my flap pieces. Once all your holes are cut, it's time to fit the eyelets. So I'm going to change my die set over again to the eyelet setting tools. Now, I will link now to a better photo or video from the trimming shop, which will show this in more detail because they have a better angle with their camera. But what I'm going to do is just fit, this is an eyelet set, so one of these pieces fits the eyelet perfectly like that, and the washer is going to be on the other side and fits around that one. So you can kind of see how it's going to work. So you want the main part of the washer, the bit that has a backing to it, you want that to be on the outside. So I'm going to have the red as my exterior. I'm going to place that through the hole like that. And on the lining side, I'm going to pop my washer on. Then what I'm going to do is set this down on my press and give it a good push. And there you have it, that is set in place, rock solid. And I'm going to repeat this process to fit the remaining 3 eyelets. So there you have your 4 flap pieces done. Now we're ready to move on to the next step. Step 3 is the main panels. If you are making the grab handle version, you're going to be starting here. Either way, you are going to have 5 pieces in lining and 5 pieces in exterior, and one of your pieces should have the ultra firm stabilizer on it. That's going to be your base, and 4 of them should have the lighter stabilizer such as Decaville Light. The remaining 5 will just have a little bit of interfacing on. If you're doing the flap version, the tie cord version, you'll also have your 4 flaps. We're going to construct the lining and the exterior the same way. So for the next few steps, I will do it just with my lining. I'm grabbing the 4 pieces that have the light stabilizer on. Set your base aside for later. What we're going to do is we're going to place 2 of them right side together. Now if you have a directional print, make sure that at this depth that they're both pointing in the same direction, because you don't want to have, like, if you've got people on it, them facing up on this panel and down on that panel. Hopefully that makes sense. So what you want to do is you want to place them right sides together and clip one side. Do the same thing with your remaining 2 panels. Clip them right sides together. Now because we're doing the same with the exterior, you can go ahead and do the same with your 4 exterior side panels. Place them right sides together and clip them together down one side, making sure that any directional prints are running in the same direction. Now I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and sew the same side on all 4 of these. I'm going to be using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I'm going to open up my pairs and I'm going to place them right sides together. So these are my 2 lining pieces for this particular one. Going to place them right sides together and clip them on the 2 open side edges. Again, if you have a directional print, make sure your prints are facing in the same direction right now. Again, we're going to do the exact same thing with the other fabric. So you're going to place them right sides together and clip the 2 side edges. We're going to take these over to the sewing machine and sew the sides using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that's sewn, I'm going to take this over to the iron. I'm going to press all of the seams open This will give a much neater finish when the bag is done. If you're using a fabric like faux leather or cork that doesn't like heat, you can just press this open with your fingers as best you can. And if you have one, use a seam roller. You should now have your exterior and lining with 4 panels connected. This will be the same for both bags. But if you're making the grab handle version, you can skip the next couple of steps where we're fitting the flaps. So what you want to do for your tie cord version is you want to turn your exterior panels right side out. And on each of these panels, you want to clip a flap. And you're going to go exteriors right sides together. And the flap should fit perfectly between the seams. Okay, so when the bag's finished, it's going to look like that. So it's got the same fabric on the exterior. So we're going exteriors right sides together. Go ahead and clip all 4 flaps on like this, one between each seam. If you have a directional print on your fabric, make sure that you're clipping this to the top edge and your print is facing up. Now I'm going to take this over to the machine and baste these flaps into place. So basting is an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance with a long stitch length, and it's just a temporary stitch to hold it in place. If you're making the grab handle version, you're going to rejoin us here. So whichever version you're making, you're going to have the lining right side in, the exterior right side out. You're going to put them together. Really, they can be either way around, but the important thing is that they're right sides together. And then what you want to do is match up these seams here. Okay, and clip those together. And do that with all 4 seams. Once your 4 seams are matched up, you just want to clip this together along the rest of this top edge. Now again, if you have a directional print, make sure that this is the top of your lining and the top of your exterior. You don't want one of them to have an upside down print. Now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and sew this top edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that your seams stay pressed open. That will make the top stitching easier later on. Now you can turn your bag right side out. So I find it quite helpful, especially with this flap version, to kind of press it with the iron now to get like a nice neat finish here. And then I push the lining in. And then I give it all another press. So this is totally up to you, but I find the more I press, the neater the finish. And what we want to make sure is that we have a really, really neat finish on the top, particularly when we're doing the flap version, but also with the grab handle version. So that's had a good press. Make sure that on these little areas here, that it is sitting nice and neat and the lining isn't showing from the outside. And then what we're going to do is we're going to match up these seams, all 4 seams, and clip them together. And this again is the same whichever style of bag you're making. Now you want to clip it together around the rest of this bottom edge. Okay, I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and baste that edge closed using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm also going to top stitch all the way around here. Now if you're making the flap version, make sure the flap is sticking up like this when you do it. And if you're doing the other version, the grab handle version, you can just go ahead and top stitch all the way around the edge. Usually your top stitching will look neater if you do it from the exterior of the bag, but that can be difficult if you're using a flatbed machine like mine. So I like to turn my bag inside out so that I'm sewing from the exterior side on top. So that is our main panels done. Set that aside and we're going to move on to the next step. Step 4 is main assembly. For this step you're going to need your lining and exterior base pieces, and one of them will have ultra firm stabilizer on it. You're going to place these wrong sides together and clip them together on all 4 sides. Now we're going to baste all 4 sides to hold those together. So now those are sewn together, what we need to do is mark little squares on each corner. So grab an erasable fabric pen, and what you want to do is mark a little 3/8 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch square. Now, to get the base to fit nice and neat, what we're going to do is snip these little squares out. You're going to do the same thing on all 4 sides. Be careful with this step because these squares match your seam allowance, that's why they're 3/8 by 3/8. If you go any bigger, then you're going to have a problem, so make sure that you are accurate when you're cutting these squares out. Now, what you're going to do is grab your main panel, whichever type of bag you're working on, this is going to be the same. You're going to place your base exteriors right side together, and you're just going to grab one of your panels, and what it should do, this section between your cutout squares should match perfectly to one of your panels. Okay, so I've got a seam here and a seam here. Clip those together, and we're going to sew from this cutout here to this one using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Start and stop with a good back stitch, but make sure that you're not going off the edge here when you back stitch, because in a minute what we're going to do is we're going to snip into this panel right next to the seam. Don't snip the seam, but snip right next to it, like this. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing on both sides. So when you back stitch here, you don't want to be going off the edge because then you'll end up snipping through your stitches. So if you prefer, you can go ahead and snip now before we sew. That's just personal preference. Make sure that you're only snipping up to this cutout square. Do not snip any further than that. So that's a 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so that's one side attached. Now what we're going to do is we're going to attach the opposite side. Okay, so this is again going to match up with the opposite panel on the bottom edge. You want to clip them together right between the seams. And then you can either do this now or after you've sewn it, but you're going to snip just to the edge of the seam. You're not going through the seam, you're just going right next to it, up to that cutout corner. What that's going to do is in a minute, once we've sewn this, it's going to allow you to pull your sides out and sew them. So first of all, we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance again. We're going between the cutout squares. Okay, so now those two sides are sewn, and now that you've snipped, these sides will come together perfectly. Okay, so they should just pop out like that, and they should match absolutely perfectly to each other. So go ahead and clip those together. Okay, and we're going to take that over to the sewing machine and sew again from the cutout corner to the cutout corner. If you are using like a bulky material, you're going to struggle to get your foot in here. So what you can do is kind of do your best, and then you'll find it's easier when you get to this end. So then what you can do is flip it over and sew it again from this end, and you'll find it easier to finish off here. So that is my recommendation if your materials are quite bulky, but hopefully if you were using a thick interfacing, then you've already trimmed the interfacing out of the bottom corners and it shouldn't be too bad. So what you should have on each corner is that you have sewn right up to the corner, and so actually your stitches have kind of met. And make sure that you backstitch well on all sides. Now we need to fit the binding. Before you fit the binding, I recommend just trimming these corners down a little bit. You'll just find it slightly easier to fit the binding. Don't go too close to your stitching because you do not want to go through it. You're just reducing the bulk on the corners, which will make it easier for the binding to sit flat. Now, if you're wondering why we're using binding for these seams, you can check out the additional information page in the pattern, which explains how it gives extra structure. So although you could easily make this bag without binding, the binding will give it better structure so that it holds its shape over time. Now, there's lots of ways that you can do binding. A lot of people like to use fold over elastic or bias binding, or you can make your own from the fabric that you're using. For me, my preferred method is this heavy duty water resistant canvas. This is a polyester, and you can leave the edges raw, which means I can cut it just 1 inch wide, and then I fold it so that it will be 1/2 inch when folded and will cover my seams. And I just give that a good roll with my seam roller. So you can see it creates a nice crease down the length. So I'm going to do that for the whole length of mine. Now I'm going to have the base of my bag and I'm going to clip my binding around the seam like this. Now again, there's loads of ways to do this. This is my preferred method. I like to sew both sides on at the same time. I know that's unusual, but for me, I get a neater finish. So whichever method of binding you want to use, you go ahead and get that clipped, and you want to start halfway along one of the straight edges. Now, because I'm going to sew it from this side, because I find that easier, I'm going to clip it from this side. That way I can check that this is covering my stitching. And then when I'm sewing it, I can see this side and check again that it's covering my stitching on that side. So when you get to your corner, what you want to do is kind of get it clipped on this side, and it's going to create like a fold on the corner like this. So it should just kind of naturally happen, and it will be folded on both sides. Okay, so clip it right up near the corner, and then as you bring the other side round, you should just be able to get this, there you go, to fold into a nice neat fold. And when you reach the end, if you don't want to have a raw edge, you can just fold the end over and clip it so that it's covering the beginning. Okay, none of my stitching is showing. That looks nice and neat. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to stitch that in place using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Your bag will look better if your binding matches the colour of your lining fabric. It will also look much better if you use a thread that matches to the binding. This way, if you do need to sew it again because you miss any of the areas, then at least the threads will match and blend in and you won't even notice. If you have one, a flathead screwdriver is an excellent tool for holding those folds in place as you're sewing them. When you reach each corner, you want to do a 90-degree turn and make sure that you leave the needle in when you lift the presser foot up to turn your bag around. And don't worry, your bag is going to get a little bit crushed when you're making it, but that's fine because we can press it later and get all of those wrinkles out. Before you move on, just check that you've caught the binding on both sides and that you don't need to sew any extra seams. But hopefully you can see, even when you don't have a perfectly matching thread, a close matching thread is going to make it look a lot neater. So now you can move on to the next step. Step 5 is the final assembly for the tie knot version, so the tie cord version. So if you're making a grab handle version, you can go ahead and skip to the next step. If you're making the tie cord version, go ahead and turn your bag so it's exterior right sides out. And you're going to really want to push that binding down, and you can kind of push it so it's up against the side panels. Make sure it's all pointing toward the sides and the corners are pushed out. This will help your bag look a lot neater. So you want all of your corners pushed out like this. Just put your thumb in there and really push it out. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to fold these flaps down and give them a good press with your hands so that they will sit flat. You could use an iron if you prefer. Now grab your cord and you want to tie a knot on one end. There's a lot of different types of cord you could use for this. I'm actually using a piping cord, but there's loads of different types. Mine is 6mm thick. So now you're going to put your cord inside the bag. Take the end that doesn't have a knot and pass it through each eyelet one at a time, working consecutively through the flaps. Okay, so they're all in order and the knot is on the inside of the bag. Now you just want to make a loop like this, and then you can see that this section is on top. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reach through, grab this and give it a good pull. Okay, make sure it's all tight. This is going to create a noose knot, and a noose knot can do this. And then it's as simple as pushing it back down. So you want to make sure that you don't have too big of a tail. Mine's probably a little bit too long, so I'm just going to loosen that and put it into the hoop. I'd say that's a better length. That's about 5 inches. So a lot of the pattern testers, they like to add beads and things on here as a decoration, but also to make sure that, you know, you don't lose your noose knot at any point. That's personal choice. For me, I've actually left most of mine like this. Just make sure that when you're undoing it, that you're not going all of the way. But then if you do, you can just redo your noose. And there you go, you can open it up just like that. And then when you want to close it, you're just gonna pull it like that. And voila. Step 5 is the final assembly, and this is the grab handle version. So if you've made the grab handle version, you will have your bag like this. So for me, this is the exterior. And the first thing I am just gonna do is just kind of crease these sides. It will help it sit more square, which is what we want. You could even press those with the iron if you want to. So you should have your grab handle. And what we want to do is mark the location for the rivets on this. So you want your rivets to be 1/2 inch and 1 1/4 inches up from the edge. So if you have a rivet placement tool, these are really handy. If not, you can just use a ruler like this. And what we want to do is mark 1/2 inch and then 1 1/4 inch, making sure it's centered. So to mark mine, I'm just going to make a little mark with my awl like that. Just prick it. Now where you've marked it, you need to punch a hole. So I'm going to use this hand tool. This is from the trimming shop too. This is an example of the kind of hand tool that you can use if you don't have a green machine press. So I've got my hole cutting die in here. This is a 2mm hole cutter, and I'm just going to punch through my mark on each mark. There are many other tools that do the same job. One of these, which has rotating punch holes, and a Japanese hole punch. So there's lots of different tools, but that's just an example of one that I'm using today. So I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes on the other side the same way. So on your bag, you're going to punch the corresponding holes. For this step, I like to use an erasable fabric pen, just in case. And what you want to do is make sure that you're centered. So this is easier if you've got a bigger ruler. So make sure that first of all you mark the center. And then what we're going to do is we're going to mark 3/4 inch down. And 1 1/2 inches down. And again, I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes through here. Then grab your rivets. I'm going to put one through the strap, one through the bottom hole there, and then you just clip that cap on. I'm going to do the same with the top hole. Put the post through and clip the cap on. Now there are multiple ways that you can set this. The easiest way, in my opinion, is with a hand press. So I've got my green machine hand press again. I've got a die set that fits up to 10mm rivets. I'm using 9mm face rivets, so this is great. I find this works really well. So I'm just going to fit my dies into my press. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this into the press, and I'm going to make sure that the bottom one sits on the bottom die and the top one fits neatly with the top die. Now before you push down with all your strength, just check that it's sitting centered like that. Just make sure, because otherwise you can dent the rivet. And there you go. Once your rivet is set, it will not be coming out. So you want to do the same thing with the second one. I'm going to repeat that with the other side so that my grab handle is attached on two sides. Okay, so that should be your handle attached and your bag is all done. So there we have our two finished bags. So I hope you've enjoyed making these with me. If you've seen the kits on our website, there's also a kit like this. We might do other ones as well. You can check them out on countrycowdesigns.com. For our next tutorial, we will be doing a live sew along. That will be coming soon. That is going to be for a new pattern. So I'll just show you that. This is a cute little crossbody. It's like a boxy bag with a detachable crossbody strap and grab handles. This will, well, when will it be? Probably about October, November sort of time, 2024. That we'll be doing a live sew along for this. So if you want to join, go ahead and join our mailing list and we will let you know as soon as we're joining, or turn on notifications on YouTube and then you'll get a notification when we are arranging the sew along. So hope to see you soon. Bye.